Unlike the other presentations, this is not an idea that the Washington Post is actually doing. It's just an idea that goes counter to what most US newspapers, or actually most newspapers, are doing around the world. So I thought I'll just kind of present it and see where it goes. It's built around a very simple notion that in order to solve our problems, we are asking our readers increasingly to pay for what they read online. And the question I'm kind of posing is, are we better off as a company, as an industry, and as a society if we actually kind of pay them to read our content? So all of you probably know or think you know why newspapers are dying. And you're partially right. In the US, in 2000, there were 1,480 newspapers. In 2010, there are 1,302 newspapers. So about 178 newspapers have disappeared in the last decade in the US. Probably a lot of you know or think you know why newspapers are dying. And the answers we get typically are, I'm worried about the environment. Not a great answer. About 8% of the people who stop reading papers tell us that they're worried about the environment. What they're actually saying really is the first reason why people stop reading newspapers, which is they don't have the time. And when they don't have the time, the papers pile up, and then they feel guilty about the environment. Increasingly, we're also hearing people say that I don't need a newspaper. I get my news through social media. I get my news through Facebook and Twitter and my friends. But here's the issue. It isn't news that is really kind of broken, if you will. It's really the news business model that is under fire. The reason I say this is because if you think about it, Google, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Groupon, none of them actually create a single word of original content. They've been fabulous platforms to kind of share, read, consume, but collectively they really don't create any content. In many ways, it's actually never been a better time to be in journalism. I mean, it might sound very strange to you when I talk about newspapers dying and I'm saying that it's never been a great time. The reason I say that is because there have never been more people consuming news than in the history of news than they are now. I mean, take the Washington Post, for example. Last year, we lost 35,000 print readers. Those are the people who dropped the paper. On average, we added 4.9 million new readers per month last year. So you can see how many more people are consuming the Washington Post content. In the 134 years of the Washington Post, not in its greatest days when we did the whole Watergate scandal, there have never been more people reading Washington Post content than they are today. So it's a great time, actually, to be in journalism. So in many ways, we are, as I gave you the numbers, we are kind of producing what people seem to want to consume. So our problem must be that we need to get them to pay somehow. In the last year and over the next year or so, there are about 200 newspapers, opinion websites, news websites in the US that are going to kind of install what are called paywalls. What are paywalls? I just pulled up a definition from Wikipedia, the source of all greatness. And there it is. You know, a paywall blocks access to a web page with a screen that requires a payment or a membership. Newspapers and others are using the model as an alternative source of revenue. And in doing so, they risk a decline in traffic because not everybody wants to pay, which in turn could mean a decline in advertising because the less traffic you have, the less you can charge for it. So I'm assuming that in this room, there are people who probably buy, I don't know, a couple of papers, if I'm lucky, one, if it's like normal, and probably many of you don't buy any newspaper. At the same time, chances are that you probably go to 3, 5, 6, 8 websites a day to get whatever information you're getting. So think about it. How many, if you're buying 1 or maybe 2 newspapers, would you really be interested in paying for 7 or 8 websites? Chances are that you're probably not. So for about 150 years now, the entire news industry has really been funded by advertising. Readers pay a little bit, and they consume news that is adjacent to advertising, and we charge advertisers a lot of money. Just to give you an idea, to buy a week's worth of Washington Post, it'll cost you $1.85. You probably can't get a cup of, Starbucks coffee for that rate. But still, hardly any newspapers in the US are actually gaining readers. So it's not really about kind of a price issue, it's just a willingness to pay issue. So just because readers have moved in large ways to digital, why does our industry think that we can somehow charge them and get them to pay and kind of be the salvation for all our problems? So the question that I ask is, can we, what if the golden age of advertising digitally, what if targeted advertising, what if kind of very creative advertising is yet to come? Do we want to kind of preempt that by starting to charge you and putting up paywalls? So what do we really need? I mean, we really need, knowing that you really don't want to pay a lot, what we need is a model that allows us to kind of grow the audience, because a loyal, growing audience means I can make more money off you, and become really more competitive as a business. So in my mind, can I have my subscription cake and eat it too, is what I'm thinking. So what if we appeal to kind of the human psyche with lessons from gaming? Most meters are two ways. One is a hard wall, which means that you can't read anything. You have to pay, you have a password, you have a login, and you can read. That's the Times of London model. Or you have the New York Times model, which allows you to read what's called a metered wall, which allows you to read 20 stories. And the moment you go up to 20, it keeps telling you, you only have 6 more to read, 5 more to read, and then you hit 20, it says, you're done, sorry, you better pay now. Goes against human psyche, right? Because it starts getting into red, and you're saying, I don't want to read anymore because I have to pay. So what if we take lessons from gaming? What if we kind of do a positive meter? What if we kind of turn, each reader can turn a paywall into a free wall by actually doing more things to it? What do I mean by that? So here's how it would work in my head. Again, not something the Washington Post is doing, not something any newspapers are doing. It's really all about kind of giving you status. So let's say we start with a bunch of points. I call them post points, which are equivalent to the ability to read 20 stories. But here is an idea. For every action that you take, right, we can actually give you more points. And for the more the points, obviously the more stories you can read. So is it possible to kind of somehow induce you to kind of read more stories, do more things to it, so that at some point, when you do 10 different activities, your reading becomes free for the rest of the month? Can I incentivize you to actually read more and do more on the side so that you can earn the rest of the month free? There'll be some people who don't want to do that, some people who maybe want to pay, but the bulk of us, if we see an ability to get to something free, chances are that we'll actually want to do that. And the more you do it, the better it is for us. So here's how it would look like. If you don't do anything, then your meter just starts coming down, you go to 0, and then you're stuck. But everything you do actually moves the meter that way. So it's kind of a positive meter, and you end up in green, your month is free. And you can do whatever you want on our website. You can read as much as you want. You can not read anything you want. So what would accumulate these points? These are all things that I'd want to do that drive more engagement, that allow me to kind of create more content. So if you comment on a story, if you recommend a story to Facebook to a friend, if you email a story, or more seriously, if you download an app, because I know that once you download it, chances are you will use it. If you point out an error in the story, I'll actually give you a lot more points. Right? Or if you respond to an advertiser, if you want to take an advertising survey, I may give you 500 points, because all of a sudden, you're so much more valuable. Of course, if you want to subscribe to the paper, I'll give you way more points so you can read all these things for free. So again, the idea is, can I incentivize you to do more? Can I incentivize you to share my stories? Can I incentivize you to comment, upload a picture, and for everything you do, treat you as a loyal customer, give you more reasons to make everything free, and then consume more? So why is this idea better than kind of a paywall? For a simple reason. The more stories you read, the more comments you make, the more user-generated content you create, means you spend more time on my site. More time on my site means I can show you more ads. It's as simple as that, right? It also means that you're much more loyal, you're likely to come back. You probably, if you're adding a lot of comments, if you're adding a lot of photos, you're creating a lot of content for my other readers. And for my journalists, which means that you're much more engaged with my content. You're sharing it, you're emailing it, you're kind of interacting with it, you're making it much more two-way. So my newsroom is pretty happy about it. Finally, it puts the choice of how to consume my news in your hands. You do more, it's free. You do less, you're telling me something about the value of my content for you. So in some ways, this goes counter to everything that's happening in terms of paywalls. To me, paywalls are interesting, but also somewhat antisocial behavior, and they're not going to solve all our problems. So this may be a way to do it. I'll end with a quote. I have about a minute left. A lot of us sit here and blame kind of what's happening externally to the problems with our industry, but at the end of the day, it's really up to us to kind of come up with creative solutions. And a creative solution is not to ask you to pay for something you've really never paid in 150 years of our history. Thank you.